I rise today to speak in support of food safety legislation. Food safety is a topic that affects every single American. Food safety is something we all care about because we all eat food. American consumers spend more than $1 trillion on food each year, and each year there are an estimated 76 million cases of foodborne illness, including at least 5,000 deaths a year in our country. That's why it's time that this important bipartisan legislation is brought to the floor. We've waited far too long to do our job and to complete our work on the issue. We've waited too long to pass a bill that will save lives. In November, we unanimously voted S-510, the bipartisan FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, out of the HELP Committee, unanimously. At the time, we were talking about the recent outbreaks of E. coli in spinach and salmonella in peppers and peanut butter, but months have passed and we still not have brought the bill to the floor. In the months since we passed the bill out of committee, we have already had more outbreaks of salmonella from black and red peppers in 44 states and frozen tuna in 6 states. 7 states have been affected by raw milk outbreaks, including my home state of Minnesota. 18 states have been affected by salmonella in frozen dinners. And this summer, we've seen one of the worst outbreaks in recent history. From May to September this year, 1,519 illnesses were reported that are likely to be associated with contaminated eggs. That includes at least 14 Minnesotans, and we may still see more cases before this awful situation has been resolved. With all of these cases of illnesses and the recalls taking place, I think we all understand the serious threat contamination poses to our food supply. We have heard repeatedly and correctly that our current food safety system is broken. The system relies too heavily on reacting to outbreaks after they have occurred instead of preventing their occurrence in the first place. This is why we need to pass federal legislation now. We must stop more Americans from getting sick and bring our country food safety system into the 21st century. S-510 will provide FDA with the resources and authorities it needs to properly oversee that safe food comes to our table. There are a lot of great provisions in this bill, and I want to highlight a few that are most important to us in Minnesota. First, the bill would give FDA the authority to require certification of imported food and verify that the food coming from foreign suppliers is safe. Our food safety system was set up in the early 1900s, and a lot has changed since then. A key difference is that we've got a lot more imported food than before. The truth is that even if we do everything right with our food products here in the United States, about 15% of our food comes from other countries. S-510 gives FDA new authority so we can avoid situations like the 2007 melamine contamination in infant formula and pet food coming from China. Secondly, S-510 would get the FDA out and inspecting food producers more often and require them to keep better records. Right now, FDA visits a given food facility every 10 years on average. A lot can change in 10 years. 10 years is just not frequent enough to assure safety. The issue is primarily one of lack of resources. As the number of food producers has increased, FDA's capacity has remained stagnant. This bill would provide FDA with the resources to inspect more frequently and target the facilities with the greatest risk for outbreaks. FDA would also have the authority to require better record keeping and access records if there's a reasonable probability that a problem is occurring. Lastly, S510 would also make sure that FDA is equipped to trace and recall food quickly when it needs to. Right now, there are a lot of processed foods with a lot of different ingredients, and there are no requirements for anyone to track where they come from. And when there's a problem, FDA can't force a company to recall its product, even when there's overwhelming evidence to do so. Let me give you an example of why these traceback and recall provisions are particularly important. In late 2008, the Minnesota Department of Health noticed an elevated number of salmonella cases. My state has one of the best surveillance systems in the country, and after comprehensive investigations, the Minnesota scientists identified the King Nut brand of peanut butter as the culprit, produced by the Peanut Corporation of America, or PCA. Minnesota folks worked with the FDA and CDC, and in January, companies began to voluntarily recall products with potentially contaminated products. But it was difficult for the company to know exactly where the contaminated peanut butter had ended up. So the recall was expanded 3 different times to try to get a hold of the outbreak. Most companies complied, but on March 23, 2009, the FDA asked the Wesco Fruit and Nut Company to voluntarily recall all of its products containing peanuts from PCA because of the contamination threat. Wesco refused. This company willingly put American lives in danger, and since FDA doesn't have a mandatory recall authority now, it wasn't until April 27, 2009, 36 days later, at the request of the FDA, that U.S. Marshals seized about $35,000 worth of PCA peanuts and products containing PCA peanuts at Wesco because of possible salmonella contamination. So even after the tainted products were identified, it took almost 5 weeks to get the salmonella-laced peanut products off the shelves and away from where they could harm people. This contamination and the subsequent investigation led to weeks of multiple company recalls of more than 2,000 different products in the shelves. But if the FDA had been able to immediately trace foods back to their producers and demand that they be recalled, we could have withdrawn the contaminated foods much more quickly, saved lives, and prevented illness. Because so much tainted peanut butter got onto our markets, the whole debacle is estimated to have cost the industry nearly $1 billion and led to the loss of innumerable jobs. But the greatest cost was to American families. Because of the tainted products that PCA sent to market, over 700 Americans became ill, half of them children. 9 people died, 3 of them from my home state of Minnesota. One of those who died was Shirley Almer, a Minnesota mother of 3 sons. She had survived brain cancer and was in good health at the time of the outbreak. And there was Clifford Sodsinya of Duluth, a Korean War veteran, father of 6, grandfather of 15, and great-grandfather of 14 who died. And Doris Flatgard of Bergen, Minnesota, who had been married to her husband, John, for 65 years before she died from eating peanut butter on her morning toast. I wanted to recount this outbreak because there are lives that were lost because we failed to protect the American people. The bill that we referred out of the Help Committee takes some steps to improve the traceback infrastructure, but I think we can do more. I decided to work on this issue when Shirley Almer's 3 sons came and met with me and told me about how their lives had changed since they lost their mother. how their family would never be the same. And they told me about the contaminated peanut butter, about how it had been included in countless products across the country, but we couldn't track the problem down fast enough since we don't require companies to keep track of where ingredients come from. That's why I've been working closely with my colleague, Senator Brown of Ohio, to strengthen the traceability provisions in S510. I think we've made some good progress, and I'm hopeful the bill will be even better because of our efforts. S510 includes a lot of other great provisions too, and there's not enough time to talk about them all. But I do know that many elements of the bill were inspired by the great food safety work that we do in Minnesota. We're really a national leader, especially in early detection of foodborne disease, and I'm pleased that my colleague from Minnesota, Senator Klobuchar, has a great provision that we hope will be in the final bill to enhance our nation's foodborne illness surveillance. Mandatory recall authority, traceability, more frequent inspections, better record keeping, and safer imported foods. These are just a few of the reasons why we need to get to the food safety bill to the president's desk, why we need to get it there now, not later, but now. Mr. President, this is legislation that every member on the Help Committee on both sides of the aisle voted to favorably report. Every member of this body recognizes the importance of food safety to the American people. The FDA Food Safety Modernization Act will finally give the FDA the tools it needs to do its job and keep Americans safe. So I urge the Majority Leader to bring this critical legislation up before we head home in October. We can't afford to wait any longer. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.